Well, we're on to episode 8 of Halloween Horror Movie Reviews 4. And tonight, oh boy, we're on to the masters A24 and Ari Aster. And honestly, here's one film Aster has done I can enjoy. Definitely not how it ends though.
Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe, your favorite meals on wheels. The menu is disgusting and it's full of special deals. Nothing here is good for you, so grab yourself a tray. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Gobble up your order quick before it runs away. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Why not visit after school and have yourselves a bite? An appetizing appetizer certain to delight. We haven't done it right unless it makes your teeth decay. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with I'm here with episode 8 of Halloween Horror Review Season 4, aka a brand new movie review. And this review is going to be for a film from A24, and it's a horror movie from one of their horror movies, and it's done by a controversial director that has gotten worse and worse as the years have progressed for his career. But it did start out great with one movie of his I liked. And this was his directional debut, and it's from the year 2018, and that film was going to be for none other than 2018's Hereditary. So what's the plot of this? Well, when her mentally ill mother passes away, Annie, played by Toni Collette, her husband, played by Gabriel Byrne, her son, played by Alex Wolff, and their daughter, played by Millie Shapiro, all mourn her loss. The family turned to different means to handle their grief, including Annie and her daughter both flirting with the supernatural. They each begin to have disturbing otherworldly experiences linked to the sinister secrets and emotional trauma that have been passed through the generations of their family. So, that's the plot. How was the movie made? Well, writer-director Ari Aster embarked on a career in the film industry while a student at the American Film Institute. He wrote and directed 2 provocative short horror films, The Strange Thing About the Johnson and McConson, and bringing him under the scope of A24. Aster originally pitched Hereditary as a family tragedy, careful not to call a horror film outright, and a fan of domestic dramas. Aster incorporated themes of the genre into his script, envisioning a film rooted in family dynamics, trauma, and grief. Carrie and the cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover were works Aster specifies influences for the film Hereditary. He interpreted the film as 2 halves which are completely inextricable from each other. It began as a family tragedy, and then continued down that path, and then curled into a full-born nightmare. And when it came to the character of Paimon, the demon king Paimon originates from numerous grimoires, including the Lesser Key of Solomon, Pisumar Damara by Jonathan Weyer, Colony Plancy's Dissectional Interferal, and the Liberty Specialist, the Liber Officium Spectrum, and the Book of Abramelin. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon, Paimon was the king of hell that commanded 200 legions of spirits or angels. Paimon was obedient to Lucifer and manifested with a crown on his head, heralded by a host of spirits like men with trumpets and well-sounding cymbals, and all sorts of musical instruments. And then when it came to casting, Toni Collette was one of the first actresses Aster saw for the role of Annie Graham, a miniaturist and the matriarch of the Graham family. Though Collette was reluctant to work on a horror film, the script's grounded approach to the genre convinced her to commit to the project. And he, aka Ari Aster, just really understood the dynamics in the family, has such an understanding of what it is to be human and what it is to experience loss. And then more casting members. Gabriel Byrne agreed to play the family's husband, Steve. Alex Wolff, who had collaborated with Byrne in the HBO program In Treatment, was cast as the grandson Peter. And cast her cinema debut, 14-year-old Broadway theater actress at the time, Millie Shapiro, winner of a Tony honor for her performance in Matilda the Musical, earned the role of the daughter Charlie. And after watching Shapiro's audition, Aster was immediately relieved because he knew the chances were slim that he would find somebody who would be right for the role of Charlie. And having left Charlie's personality more ambiguous than other characters in the script, Nan Dowd portrayed grieving mother Joan, who convinces Annie of her ability to contact the dead. So, after the film was shot and marketed, Hereditary would go on to premiere at the Sundance Film Festival on January 21st, 2018, and was actually released in the United States on June 8, 2018. And the film received widespread acclaim. When it released into theaters, it got widespread acclaim from critics. The praise from critics went to Colette's performance, Aster's direction, and Stetson's score, although it was more divisive with audiences, like most of A24's horror films. At the box office, it originally at the time was A24's highest grossing horror film and their highest grossing film yet, with $82 million worldwide on a $10 million budget. Two records that were held until Everything Everywhere All at Once last year, and for their horror films, Talk to Me this summer. Now, as for my reaction to Hereditary, now for those who hate all of Aster films and A24, especially this one, I do personally still like this film, but I do agree their better ones, their better horror film is The Lighthouse, and their best movie is Always Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think those two are better than this movie. And I will admit, guys, I was not a fan of this movie at first, because the first time I saw this was in theaters around Father's Day weekend back in the year it came out. I didn't really know what to think of it at the time. And I think it was because that weekend it was kind of getting more introduced to beer around that weekend. And especially the night before we went to see this. We went to see this in the afternoon, guys. So I seemed a little too tired and drained that day to really have much enthusiasm. And plus, it was boiling hot that weekend. So it was kind of impossible to have much enthusiasm for much stuff at that time. I think I was just a little hungover from the night before. But then I went to go see it a second time around August, one night later that summer. And honestly, I liked it much better the second time around. And at the time, I could not wait to see what Ari Aster did next. And we all know how that's gone so far. He hasn't done anything great since this movie. Lol. Now let's get on with the review for this movie anyways. The whole of this movie is unnerving, the atmosphere is chilling, much of the help of the score and excellent performances of all the actors, the flow in the directing, on top of the cinematography, all play an effective part in this story, and is unique in its own way. And I especially love the plot device of the miniatures. Now the family's home from outside can be debated as real or a model, and it evokes doubt of what is real and what it is not. Unfortunately, I do give this film high praise. I don't really overly love it. It's not really 10 out of 10 worthy. Since the director's goal is to upset audiences on a deep level, he not only succeeded in this for this one time, he may have been a little too effective, because this is not a fun horror movie. He's now just done this for all his movies now. It's like he never does anything new nowadays. Hereditary, though, is a film that largely deals in atmosphere and emotional horror. The Shining, much like The Shining, which is my favorite horror movie of all time, you all know, is a clear touchstone. I would go as far as saying that this was easily one of the first modern horror films I saw at the time that really captured a similar tone and ethos to that movie. Much like that film, it delivers in horror through an intensifying sense of unease and dread, and it becomes nearly suffocating by its conclusion. Rather than startling you with cheap scares, it offers haunting and upsetting images that are often delivered without any of those overused sonic jolts. And perhaps most importantly, it anchors everything in an emotional core with nuanced characters who experience relatable family struggles and grief. And it's absolutely critical to what makes the movie effective and resonant. It works on a metaphorical level, using the supernatural story as a vehicle to explore the very real way in which a family could be absolutely ravaged by tragedy, and furthermore how trauma and mental illness are passed through the generations. It would definitely be remiss not to mention that Toni Collette gives a memorizing performance in a film that is unhinged and truly difficult to stomach at times. And the morning hype for the official release of Hereditary reached stratospheric proportions. However, it's definitely in your best interest to check those expectations prior to first watching this movie, if you haven't seen it yet. At the time this movie came out, multiple outlets went as far as to tout the Ari Aster creation as the next Exorcist. And that level of expectation is not really true. Because The Exorcist, I think, is just because I don't think modern horror films should be compared to something like The Exorcist. The plots are different, and they're different, and they were released in different styles of storytelling. And I don't think A24 films in general should be getting compared to gems of the old years. That are sometimes the better movies, a lot of them. And Exorcist, though, and plus Exorcist, I just think is averagely good at best, and it's not even masterpiece worthy like people call it. If you want a better Exorcist movie, guys, go watch Exorcist 3. That to me is the true masterpiece of the Exorcist films. When it comes to a mental illness, having a mental illness is enough to be frightening, and when you're in that state in which you have no idea whether your thoughts are your own or a manifestation of the illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, or even depression, all these cause sudden changes that are never that of the person's character, but the cause of a chemical imbalance, and then we add a supernatural element to the mix, and you have another layer of mystery. And you notice that a lot of the best ghost stories include people that usually have a mental illness or a secret background. Other elements cleverly add to unbalance of the character, making their situation or viewpoint of the audience more frightening. When it comes to certain movies like The Haunting, Rosemary's Baby, Poltergeist, and The Conjuring, they all feature characters with the previous state's attributes that add to the film's suspenseful tone without going over the top. And our notion that's not addressed too often in movies about mental illnesses, the hereditary aspect. Those of us who grow up with those who grow up with a family history can be scared themselves of the destiny that will force them to the same problems. Hereditary brilliantly adds many layers to that fear along with the ghost story. Because the plot of this, the ghost story of this is this miniature artist is in the middle of dealing with her mother's passing, and at the funeral she mentioned she had a shaky relationship with her, who in return was a private woman. And her family includes a husband, a teenage son, and a daughter. In addition to her daughter being a reclusive oddball, she reveals that a supporting group that her family had a history of mental illness. And he even starts seeing her mother in random spots in the house, even though no one else can see her. And then another family tragedy again ends up happening and pushes Annie's mental state further until she meets a woman, Joan, and tells her that the dead can be contracted through a seance. Annie then uses the tricks taught to her to show her family that it's real. And time passes by, more images of the family are heard and seen in ghostly form, while the living members each go through their own trials and reveal more about Ellen. And the story starts off very fast and builds its tense very well. All the characters are believable and relatable in a way, except maybe for one. The story creates a very mysterious tone, but it keeps this very scary feeling throughout. The plot gets extremely disturbing quickly, and keeps the disturbing imagery flowing smoothly and gracefully, and uses silence makes your stomach turn as you anticipate a scare. Sometimes a scare comes, but other times it leaves you waiting. And like a lot of horror movies, what's best is what you don't know, and Hereditary has those necessary layers. Let's address the most important aspect of it, which is the characters. And Toni Collette proves again that she takes her typical mom trope and gives it that extra weight. And if Hereditary deserves any recognition other than Ari Aster's skills as a talented filmmaker, it's Toni Collette's Oscar-delivering performance as Anne. And Collette creates an emotionally complex character from her performance, and Collette can go from showing complete denial to break it down to complete despair to discovering something horrible, and then she'll just lash out with the fury of hell in a particular dinner scene that will definitely not be forgotten. Once you see Anne's psyche break, Collette convinces you her turn from being a skeptic to suddenly believing in the supernatural thanks to the desperation she expresses on her face. It helps that along with her family history and the fact she does have a lot on her belt, she still has the motivation to dig deeper on what's going on. And it makes the story just as interesting to us as it is to her. Most of the performances from the rest of the cast are great. There's one that does kind of feel cringe in certain scenes, but you'll find out later. But I think some of you know which character performance I'm already hinting at. Gabriel Byrne does a wonderful job as a dad of the family who's trying to keep his sanity and keep his family together, even though it never works out no matter what he does. Millie Shapiro hits definitely the most, though, hits a home run in her film debut, despite the limited screen time she has. Little spoiler alert, guys. Millie Shapiro the most easily rounds out the cast. Her performance for a newcomer is so deep, we're not sure what is going on with her, but her dialogue and everything she does is important to the story. I definitely won't give any explicit spoilers to this film, so don't worry. What I will say is that the movie is definitely gorgeous. The direction, the cinematography, the lighting, every frame, every shot, everything is delicious to look at. When Hereditary shines, it's in its tone and atmosphere. Walking to this movie is like definitely walking to a true nightmare. These aren't any big fantasy-like set pieces or even a gothic house. But it takes the kind of household you might see from an upper-class family, and it makes it feel so uncomfortable and unfamiliar that moving forward is like taking a deep breath. The director, Ari Aster, really shows shows superb amount of craft for a horror story that could have been handled okay or mediocrely. Aster never lets the horror be something that is front and center. He shows very little jump scares, relies on very little explanation of the supernatural until the third act, while the horror is lurking off screen, which makes it even more effective. The attention is made towards a dysfunctional relationship within the Graham family. By exploring the idea of family-based mental illnesses, Aster makes us question if this family truly has control over their horrible choices, or if they have inherited something that denies them choice at all. As the film goes deeper into the mentality of the Grahams, psychophysis or supernatural blurred challenge of what is real or not, when supernatural horror kicks in, you already start to feel your sanity slipping away. Again, what the hell happened to this guy after he had so much potential to be a wonderful director? The build-up to this tension is held by Paul Pogorzelski's cinematography. The film now and then shows Annie making lifelike miniature replicas of her house. Every room in her artwork matches to detail the real-life house, and thanks to the way Pogorzelski frames the camera, a negative space makes you feel like the characters are unknowingly living inside one of these miniatures. The camera's perspective makes feel like some higher power is watching their behavior, like someone is looking at fish inside an aquarium. And the music's definitely atmospheric, and it really does make the movie feel great for me as well. In typical horror fashion, Hereditary embraces the fact that white people do the dumbest things when it comes to the supernatural. And Colette's character becomes obsessed with unraveling secrets of her mother, especially after the family experiences more tragedy. And while the family is splintering apart from the events of the film, she starts an investigation into the paranormal to find answers and soon finds herself out of her depth. The result is her meddling where she doesn't belong is absolutely terrifying. And Aster, though, doesn't really focus on jump scares or a lot of blood splatter to tell us this tale of horror. Instead, his approach is all about tone and pacing. Hereditary is this completely engulfing experience that you can not only see and hear, but also feel. And definitely don't let that fool you, though. There's plenty of moments in the film that are hard to watch. The same level of difficulty and complexity put into the narrative are in the creepy imagery. One of the best aspects of this bestial family nightmare is the powering, discomfort, and creativeness bathering every picture. Without hesitation, I definitely verify that even some of the minor elements on screen have a narrative purpose that will definitely mean a handful for the next move or twist a few scenes later. While much of that reinforcement is packed in the script, there's definitely several shots visually. In the last minutes of the feature, we're definitely familiar with that beautifully spoken wooden house. We know the position of each room, where the loft, Annie's work area, the kitchen, the dining room, and of course that scary treehouse are. Definitely an amazing achievement, possibly by the excellent camera work. Another horror film, which was by Fed Alvarez, called Don't Breathe, focused on elements that would be key pieces later, but similarly, this movie has this importance on select utensils and visual tools that will make sense sometime later. And Pavel Pogorzelski's cinematography doesn't accept improvements, but the way he alternates colors, shades, radical changes of atmosphere, always influenced by an adjacent darkness. And Colin Stetson, creator's dreamlike, nightmares compositions, having the opportunity to empower the most bizarre scenes in which his meaningful melodies steal the spotlight. It's definitely rewarding what is coming, zero tranquility, 100% tribulation, and a score true to its source that paralyzes your senses. And there's some truly horrifying scenes in Hereditary, and it progresses from a story about family grief into a manic nightmare, and it takes on a grim, almost depressing tone sometimes in its exploration of mental illness and dysfunctional family dynamics. There's even a feeling of dread throughout the film that's hard to shake. And I think without a doubt, the most upsetting moment of the film is this scene. It's around the middle of the film. Peter gets invited to this teen party, and he disguises it as some school event in order to get Annie's approval to borrow one of the cars to go there. And then she pretty much forces Charlie to go with him since she believes it's some school event, but Charlie clearly doesn't want to go. And once there, Peter goes to smoke some pot with his crush. Then Charlie helps herself to some chocolate cake. That's at the party. Not knowing it as nuts, since we find out in the beginning of the movie she has a nut allergy. And then that starts to take effect, and when she alerts Peter, the first thing he does is quickly drive her to the hospital, but then he almost hits a dead mirror moose on the road, one of them, and then Charlie ends up hitting her head on the pole and getting fucking decapitated. On fucking camera. And after a moment of silence, Peter then drives home and he just goes to bed in silence. Then the next morning, the rest of this shot is literally just on Peter's dead, wide-awake face. Annie then finds her body in the car before she can go do an errand, and Colette's screams in this scene are extremely heart-wrenching in this moment. And we get a quick shot of ants crawling all over Charlie's decapitated head, and then pretty much Annie spends a majority of the film just hating Peter, and even outright screams at him at the dinner table in one part when he does try to stand up for himself in one scene, which in the theater, the first time I saw this, even I felt pretty affected by that one moment. and I quickly put my popcorn down and literally just paid attention to the whole screen with my mouth open in silence. And some of the finale, there's some problems with the finale, but some of it is a little haunting, even if it gets a bit clunky. For the frightening stuff of the finale, Steve, after Peter ends up injuring himself, as the movie progresses, Peter's sanity starts to lose itself, and one moment Peter injures himself in school, and then Steve brings Peter home after the incident where he got possessed and banged his head on the desk and broke his nose. Annie then approaches the car, and it's dry with no sign of the downpour, and Annie tells Steve that Ellen's corpse was in their attic, but it is now decapitated, and Annie also shows Steve the photographs where Joan and Ellen are wearing the seal of payment, and Annie explains that her family became cursed when she tried contacting Charlie, and Annie then even explains the connection to Charlie's sketchbook, and that Steve needs to destroy it in order to save Peter. While Peter sleeps in his room in the background, he's not awakened by the conversation because he's unconscious. But Steve has now just finally had it with Annie at this rate, because he's starting to lose trust in Annie as the film progresses, and he disbelieves her wild claims, and Steve accuses Annie of digging up Ellen's grave, and when Steve refuses to burn a sketchbook and threatening to have her arrested, Annie throws it back in the fire, even though she presumes doing so will kill her, but it'll make the sacrifice. But of course the demon was playing tricks at that moment because it doesn't work, and Steve just combusts into flames instead of Annie, and then Annie is quickly possessed by Payman shortly after, having now finally succeeded. Now with his possessed mother hovering in the corner above his bed, which is actually a really effective jump scare the second time I saw this, Peter gets up to search the house, and even Annie just crawls away as he's just looking around in silence. It's a quick blink and you'll miss it moment. Then when Peter leaves his room, the ladder to the attic is withdrawn missing, and Peter finds his father's charred corpse. And after that, Annie quickly chases crazy after Peter while possessed to the attic, and the ladder to the attic is now down, and Annie jumps up and furiously pounds her head on the attic door after Peter climbs the ladder and to hide. While he's in the attic, Peter finds flies, candles, a photo of his face with the eyes punched out, Ellen's body is gone, and then Annie is suddenly there in the corner of the attic, hovering above Peter before she pretty much severes her own head. And that's about it for the frightening stuff there at that part, because the rest of the finale gave me some problems. Because now I will admit, I did have some bad qualities with this movie I can agree with people on. It's definitely not flawless in any way, guys. There are some problems I can agree with people on. First problem I have with this movie, probably Alex Wolff's performance as Peter. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm sorry, those who praise his performance. I thought his performance just felt bland or at times just really cringy. There's some scenes in the movie where he just kind of feels bored or just stale. And then in some scenes, there's scenes where his character just cries. And some of his crying just sounds really awful to listen to. I get this character is going through hell and is losing his sanity as well, but a lot of stuff in this performance really needed work. Or maybe just a better actor for the character. Plus, there's even some times where he's just a bit of an idiot with his choices. But Peter was kind of a bit of a dumbass in this film. So, I didn't really feel much for his character. Because there's times when his performance was just really needed improvement. And the marketing's also really misleading because it looks like Charlie's going to be the lead of the movie, but instead, the trailers lie, and she gets literally killed off around the middle of the film, so what was the point of her character in the advertising? Shapiro gives a good performance, but why kill her off? And finally, the rest of the ending, especially the plot twist. I get a downer ending as the only way this movie was probably going to work, but it feels like Ari Aster was clearly acting as if he was all M. Night Shyamalan when doing this ending. And that is not something to be proud of, knowing how M. Night Shyamalan's career is today. That's not something you should ever be proud of being. You should never try to compare yourself to M. Night. No. Because even M. Night Shyamalan got shitty with his endings. Peter's head then, after Peter jumps out the window to escape this naked cult, show that you don't want to see naked, we shouldn't have to see them naked, he hits the ground below and seemingly does kill him. Then Peter rises after the oddly glowing light seen previously that hovers around his body, that Peter follows his mother's headless corpse as it floats into the treehouse, and a symbol of mostly devil worshippers, which was the therapy group we find out, in various states of undress, greets Peter inside the treehouse. There's one woman with long hair and a bathrobe, and Charlie's decapitated head sits atop a statue of Payman, and Peter looks around with a dazed flat expression, and we're shown Annie and Ellen's headless bodies lie bowing on the floor in front of the statue. In Joan's voice, then, we find out Joan is actually part of this cult, and Joan was trying to make Payman a new host the whole time. That's why she was being friends with Annie. She needed to get a male host for Payman. And then Joan's voice calls Peter Charlie, as a woman crowns him, but welcomes Peter as Payman, while the Coven hail the demon's arrival. And this story ends with a shot of model treehouse filled with dolls that look like Peter, the Coven, the Headless, and Annie and Ellen. So yeah. Any of that stuff that involves the Joan character, or the cult guys, or just this whole plot twist in general with the Payman shit, no. Ari Aster, stop it! And I also think the movie just did not need to be 127 minutes long. The Shining was like 144 minutes long, but The Shining's based off a Stephen King book. And the runtime's meant to progress the story characters and hotel more, so there's an excuse there for that runtime. The movie could have been like 114 minutes, and I wouldn't have minded that. Just take out the cult stuff, take out most of the Jones stuff in the finale, and take out the twist involving the dead grandma, and then it's a bit better there. However, that's it for bad qualities because, regardless, I still like Hereditary. For those that don't like the movie, that's fine, but please don't go. But those of you who also like Rambo Afterlife and Speed Communications, I know they hated this movie, and I know some of my subscribers who subscribe to them also hate this movie, but please do not go giving me shit by insulting me for praising this movie or calling me an idiot for liking this movie, because you very well know, guys, any rude comments towards me gets you blocked. So keep that in mind. In the end, Hereditary is worth the watch and buy for A24 fans, and those that want to see one good film Ari Aster has done, and it's going to be definitely his only good movie, I can already tell, knowing how every film he's done has gotten worse. Anyways, that's it for my view of Hereditary, and if we're wondering how I'm going to rank Hereditary, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you have problems with Ari Aster but want to see the only good thing he's done in his career, then watch or buy us for your collection, but don't expect our opinions to be the same as everyone else, as expect some iffy problems for sure. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Hereditary, I'm going to give Hereditary a 9 out of 10. And there we go! That's it for my review of Hereditary. So you're wondering, what's the next episode going to be? Well, our next episode is going to be another Ari Aster film, and it's the one he did after this. It's set in Sweden. It introduced me to one of my newest celebrity crushes, who is a British actress. Guys. Yeah. I'll admit that. And, this one was more of a breakup movie. Yeah, guys. Midsummer is going to be the next episode. So that'll be 2 A24 movies in this season. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode. I gotta go make dinner now. Thank y'all for watching. Like this, want to see more. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.